Most actors spend their entire careers chasing one hit show. Pernell Roberts walked away from his. At the peak of Bonanza, a series watched by tens of millions every week, he made a decision that stunned Hollywood and confused the public. He turned his back on fame, money, and a role that guaranteed him lifelong recognition. To viewers, the Cartwrights were a comforting symbol of family values. To Roberts, the show was something very different. He saw a polished machine built on predictable morals, rigid storytelling, and stereotypes he could no longer justify delivering. While the rest of the world saw entertainment, he saw harm quietly woven into each episode. Instead of staying silent, he chose to leave. He walked away with no safety net, no bigger job lined up, and no certainty that anyone in the industry would ever hire him again. Hollywood saw it as arrogance. Fans saw it as betrayal. But Roberts saw it as the only decision he could live with. Years later, when people finally re-examined Bonanza, he didn't look stubborn anymore. He looked ahead of his time. This is the story of the man who left everything behind because he refused to compromise, and how doing the right thing can destroy you long before it ever saves your legacy. It didn't take long for Roberts to realize just how firmly the show controlled everything around him. Bonanza was built on a formula that worked, and once NBC saw how successful that formula was, they protected it viciously. Characters couldn't grow too much. Storylines couldn't challenge the audience. Every episode needed to wrap up neatly, with the same familiar morals and the same predictable outcomes. It was safe, profitable, and completely resistant to change. For an actor searching for depth, that was suffocating. Roberts had come from a world where stories were meant to challenge people. On stage, he explored themes of justice, human conflict, and complexity. But on Bonanza, the world was deliberately simplified. Conflicts were resolved in tidy endings, characters stayed the same, and the show refused to push into areas that might disturb its loyal viewers. The longer he stayed, the more he felt himself shrinking inside the role. Adam Cartwright wasn't evolving, and neither was he. He began to dread reading new scripts, not because they were terrible, but because they were exactly the same. He knew his lines before he opened the pages. He knew how each story would end. He knew Adam would always stay in his assigned place within the Cartwright family. Success became a cage disguised as comfort. Even the fame that came with the role felt hollow. Roberts wasn't proud of the work. He wasn't excited about the stories. He wasn't inspired by the direction the show kept taking. He often said he wasn't interested in being famous for standing around and saying lines he didn't believe in. The deeper he thought about it, the more he realized the show was giving him everything except the one thing he cared about most, a sense of artistic honesty. He was trapped in a role millions loved, but he didn't love it back. As the pressure built, Roberts started to feel the weight of a decision he hadn't made yet, but knew was coming. Staying on Bonanza meant giving up the part of himself that demanded truth in storytelling. Leaving meant walking away from the biggest opportunity he would ever have. Every day on set, the cage felt smaller, and eventually, he knew he couldn't stay inside it anymore. Pernell Roberts' breaking point wasn't just creative boredom, it was the content itself. As the seasons went on, he began to see a deeper problem woven into the show, one that most viewers either ignored or didn't notice. Beneath the surface of the family-friendly Western were storylines built on stereotypes and outdated ideas that Roberts believed were harmful. Native American characters were often reduced to faceless threats. Mexican characters slipped into caricature, bandits, buffoons, or helpless victims. Asian characters, especially Hop Sing, were written with exaggerated accents and simplified traits that reinforced old Hollywood tropes. And the dynamic within the Cartwright family itself often relied on moral lessons Roberts found too simplistic to be meaningful. To him, these weren't harmless storytelling choices. They were messages being broadcast to millions of people every week, messages that shaped how viewers saw entire groups of people. Roberts felt responsible for the impact those stories had, and that responsibility weighed on him heavily. Off-screen, he lived a very different life. He was politically outspoken, deeply engaged in civil rights issues, and active in movements that challenged discrimination. He marched in the South. He spoke publicly about equality. He believed art should elevate understanding, not pull it backward. So every time he stepped into Adam Cartwright's boots and delivered a line that contradicted his values, the internal conflict grew sharper. Roberts didn't just complain quietly, he pushed back. He confronted writers, questioned producers, and argued for scripts that treated minority characters with depth and dignity. But every time he raised concerns, he hit the same brick wall. The network didn't want change. They wanted consistency, comfort, and ratings. Anything that challenged the formula was dismissed before it ever had a chance. That dismissal cut deeper than the scripts themselves. Roberts realized the show wasn't accidentally insensitive. It was intentionally unchanging. It wasn't trying to tell truths about the West or America. It was trying to keep viewers comfortable, even if that comfort came at the expense of whole communities. And for Roberts, that was unforgivable. He reached a point where acting in those episodes felt like participating in something he no longer believed in. Every scene became another reminder that the values he fought for off-camera were being undermined by the work he did on camera. He didn't see the show as entertainment anymore. He saw it as a lie, and he refused to be the face of that lie any longer. When Pernell Roberts finally made his decision, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't even sudden. It was the quiet result of years of frustration, conflict, and a growing sense that he was participating in something he no longer believed in. After the 1964-65 season, at a time when Bonanza was still one of the biggest shows in the country, Roberts stunned Hollywood by announcing he was leaving. People didn't understand what he was doing. Actors didn't walk away from hit shows. Not in the 1960s, not when millions of viewers knew your name, and definitely not when your paycheck was secure and growing. Roberts had everything most performers dreamed of: a popular role, industry respect, and a steady stream of money that would have made him wealthy for life. But none of that mattered to him anymore. Fame meant nothing if he hated the work that earned it. The network tried to convince him to stay. Executives met with him, producers pleaded with him, and even some of the cast urged him not to throw away what he'd built. To them, his reasons sounded idealistic, even reckless. They believed a show existed to entertain, not to carry the weight of social responsibility. And they believed Roberts was letting his principles blind him to the reality of how the business worked. But Roberts wasn't swayed. To him, staying on Bonanza felt like choosing comfort over conscience. The more people tried to talk him out of leaving, the more certain he became that walking away was the only choice he could live with. Every argument in favor of staying sounded like a compromise he wasn't willing to make. When the news became public, the backlash was immediate. Fans felt betrayed. The press labeled him ungrateful. Industry insiders whispered that he was difficult, a word every actor fears because it can follow you for years. And for Roberts, it did. Almost overnight, he became the man who rejected success, the star who walked away from a goldmine as if he didn't appreciate what he had. But underneath all the criticism, Roberts held on to one simple truth. He hadn't left because of pride or ego. He left because he couldn't continue playing a character inside a show that violated the values he stood for off-screen. He walked away not because the role was beneath him, but because it required him to betray the part of himself he valued most. Hollywood said he was foolish. Fans said he was selfish. But Roberts believed he was doing the only thing he could do if he wanted to look himself in the mirror. Leaving Bonanza wasn't just a career choice. It was a line he refused to cross, even if it cost him everything. Once Pernell Roberts left Bonanza, the shift was immediate. The spotlight that once followed him everywhere simply vanished. Hollywood didn't attack him openly. It just stopped calling. One day he was part of a cultural giant, and the next he was a reminder of what the industry considered a bad example, an actor who refused to play by its rules. With television doors quietly closing, Roberts returned to the stage. Regional theater, touring shows, and small productions became his new home. The audiences were smaller, but the work felt more honest. Acting mattered again, even if the fame didn't. Still, it was an adjustment. Instead of millions watching him every week, he was performing for a few hundred people at a time. Public recognition didn't bring comfort either. Fans remembered Adam Cartwright, not the man who walked away. Many couldn't understand why he left, and some never forgave him for it. To them, his departure felt personal, as if he had abandoned their family, not just the cast. Inside the industry, his reputation worked against him. Directors respected his talent, but feared his principles. Producers admired his honesty but didn't trust his independence. Hollywood values predictability, and Roberts had proven he wasn't someone who followed the crowd, so he kept working quietly, steadily, and without the attention he once had. The stage became a refuge, but it was also a reminder of what he'd sacrificed. He had given up television's biggest platform, and the consequences followed him for years. But even through the loneliness of those years, he never backed down from the choice he made. He held on to his principles, not knowing that a second chance, his comeback, was still waiting further down the road. Pernell Roberts' comeback didn't arrive with fanfare or headlines. It came slowly, years after most of Hollywood had pushed him aside. By the late 1970s, he was older, quieter, and carrying the weight of a decade spent away from the spotlight. But then a role appeared that finally matched the kind of work he always believed television should offer. That role was Dr. John McIntyre in Trapper John, M.D. This wasn't a simplistic Western with fixed morals. It was a modern medical drama built on real conflict, nuance, and maturity. Roberts fit into it naturally. The character had depth, flaws, and authority. Everything he'd been denied when he played Adam Cartwright, and audiences responded immediately. For 7 seasons, he anchored the series with a grounded performance that critics praised. He even earned an Emmy nomination, proof that the industry couldn't ignore his talent forever. After years of being labeled difficult, Roberts was finally recognized for the kind of storytelling he had always fought for. But even as the show succeeded, one thing never went away. Every interview, every article, every Hollywood conversation still mentioned the same thing. He was the man who left Bonanza. His comeback wasn't treated as vindication, it was framed as redemption, as if he had finally made up for a choice he never regretted. To Roberts, Trapper John wasn't an apology, it was validation. He had walked away from a role that betrayed his values, and years later, he proved he could succeed on his own terms. But even with that victory, there were still relationships and a fan base who never forgave him for leaving the Ponderosa. Even after Trapper John brought Pernell Roberts back into the spotlight, the shadow of Bonanza followed him everywhere. It didn't matter how strong his performances were or how much critics praised his work. People still talked about the decision he made in 1965. To the industry and the public, he wasn't just an actor, he was the man who walked away from America's favorite Western. His relationships with former co-stars were never the same. Some had understood his frustration, at least privately, but they didn't agree with how loudly he pushed back or how abruptly he left. Others felt he made the rest of them look complicit, like he was drawing a moral line they were unwilling to cross. Hollywood is a place where friendships often rely on convenience, and once Roberts stepped outside the machine, those bonds quietly faded. What hurt more was how the audience reacted. Fans didn't see nuance. They saw abandonment. They saw a beloved character disappear from their screens without a proper farewell. Many never forgave him for it. Even years later, strangers would approach him in airports, restaurants, or theaters and ask the same question: "Why did you leave us?" Not, "Why did you leave the show?" "Why did you leave us?" That distinction cut deep. To Roberts, it revealed something uncomfortable about fame. Fans didn't separate the actor from the character. They believed he owed them loyalty, and when he chose his principles over their expectations, they took it personally. No amount of explanation ever changed their minds. No interview softened their opinion. To the audience, he had broken the unspoken contract. He walked away from their comfort. And that became his permanent label. No matter how strong his comeback was, no matter how much good work he did afterward, he was always introduced with the same footnote: the actor who left Bonanza. Hollywood never let him bury that identity. It followed him from job to job, from decade to decade, until it became the central thread of his public story. Roberts had hoped that time and distance would shift the narrative. Instead, it hardened. His departure wasn't remembered as an act of integrity. It was remembered as the moment he walked away from something millions of people cherished. And that memory was far louder than the ideals he had fought for. The painful truth became impossible to ignore. His principles shaped his legacy, but so did the resentment of the very people who once loved him most. And even as the years passed, another twist was waiting, because history had one more turn left in his story, long after Hollywood stopped listening. For decades, Pernell Roberts lived with the consequences of a choice almost no one understood. But time has a way of revealing what people refuse to see in the moment. And long after the dust settled, a quiet shift began. critics started revisiting old westerns. Historians began studying how early television portrayed race, culture, and morality. Younger audiences watched Bonanza not for nostalgia, but with fresh eyes. And suddenly, the flaws Roberts fought against became obvious. Viewers noticed how Native Americans were written as nameless threats. They noticed how Mexican characters were flattened into stereotypes. They noticed the exaggerated one-note portrayal of Hop Sing. They noticed how the Cartwrights' sons, grown men, were rarely allowed to think or act independently. What Roberts once called poison was now widely acknowledged as a reflection of outdated values. The same criticisms that made him difficult in the 1960s started appearing in modern essays, documentaries, and retrospectives. Writers praised his bravery for speaking out long before it was safe to do so. Fans online began calling him ahead of his time. Academics pointed to him as one of the first actors in mainstream television to challenge racist storytelling from inside the industry. Slowly, the narrative shifted. He wasn't just the man who left Bonanza anymore. He was the man who recognized its problems before anyone wanted to admit they existed. But this recognition came with a bittersweet truth. Roberts never lived to see this reassessment. During his lifetime, the backlash drowned out the nuance. The labels difficult, stubborn, ungrateful followed him until the end. Hollywood didn't celebrate him for integrity. Fans didn't thank him for taking a stand. And the industry didn't rewrite his legacy until years after he was gone. History finally vindicated him, but too late for him to feel any of it. That's the irony of his story. Roberts paid the price in real time, while the validation came long after the struggle ended. His instincts, once dismissed as troublemaking, are now seen as principled foresight. The culture moved toward the values he fought for, but only after he had already paid the cost of being early. And that brings his story to its final, hardest truth. Being right can take years to matter, but being early can cost you everything. Pernell Roberts' story is ultimately about what happens when someone values principle more than comfort. He walked away from fame, money, and one of the biggest shows in television, not because he wanted a bigger role, but because he couldn't stand behind something he believed was harmful. And for that, he paid a price Hollywood never let him forget. While he was alive, people didn't praise him for integrity. They called him ungrateful. They didn't understand his reasons. They only saw the empty space he left behind on Bonanza. The labels, difficult, stubborn, hard to work with, followed him long after he stepped off the Ponderosa. Yet years after his death, the culture finally caught up to what he tried to say in the 1960s. Modern viewers see the stereotypes he fought against. Critics acknowledge the quiet courage it took to challenge a network at the height of its power. And the same honesty that once hurt him now defines him. But that vindication came too late for Roberts to see. He carried the weight of that decision alone, long before anyone understood it. And that's the truth of his legacy. Being right doesn't guarantee support, success, or forgiveness. Sometimes it only guarantees struggle. But Roberts chose integrity anyway, knowing the cost, accepting the fallout, and refusing to compromise. History eventually proved him right, even if the world didn't realize it until long after he was gone. Subscribe for more powerful stories, hidden truths, and deep dives into the legends Hollywood tried to forget.